Hello everyone, welcome to this session on Jenkins tutorial. Jenkins is an automation tool used in DevOps for automating the pipeline and making the system bug-free and automating the process faster without human intervention. So without any delay, let's talk about the agenda for today's session. Now we're going to understand firstly why we need continuous integration, or commonly referred to as CI in the industry. After the why part, then we shall move on to what is continuous integration. Then we're going to talk about Jenkins as the primary CI tools. Then we will see how to install Jenkins and set up Jenkins in our system. Later on, we will see some examples of how to create a Jenkins pipeline. And then finally, we will summarize what we have talked about throughout the session. Meanwhile, guys, do not forget to subscribe to our Edureka YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to learn more about DevOps tools and the other relevant technologies. Now you can take a look at our training page, the link to which is given in the description box below. So guys, let's first talk about why we need continuous integration. Let's talk about a scenario where we are not using continuous integration. Now when we work in a development team, there are multiple developers. Now all the developers work on different components for a project or for a code. A developer A may be writing code thinking scenario, let's say Python 1.0, and developer B will be writing code thinking of a scenario 1.2, 1.3, and so on. One of the biggest challenges that we face in an industry is how to make sure that all the developers' codes get collaborated and that we are having properly release getting deployed. That is the biggest challenge in the industry. Now, another challenge that most developers fail is debugging. Now, whenever you write a code, there are a lot of bugs and issues. Now, the code is often written thousands and thousands of lines. Now, if you don't have any proper continuous integration mechanism or a packaging mechanism, you'll see it takes days, even weeks and months to debug your code to make it 100% bug-free. Now, that is a challenge that really makes the development process very slow. So, how to test the code? Now, testing used to be a monotonous task. Now, there are teams used to spend months of a life cycle to make the code, complete the test code, and make sure it's bug-free. Now, what used to happen is, guys, two things. One is you are not able to deliver on time, and secondly, business never see value coming out of the IT. If businesses see IT not adding value, IT is not delivering product on time, they will start rethinking and giving a second thought. Why do we need to invest so much money in the IT industry or in the IT software? These things were hampering big time in the development and release of modern day deployment software cycles. In the modern day world, we want to make sure our deployment cycles are robust, we're able to get the main need of the market and deploy the product as soon as possible. But with this approach, we're not using the CI tools. It used to take 6 months to develop a product, deploy a product, and make it bug-free. Now things change drastically when we start using continuous integration. Now, using continuous integration, we can deploy codes at the quickest. Amazon, for instance, deploys code every 11.6 seconds. Now, how is that possible if you ask? It's because they are using the continuous integration mechanism. Using CI tools like Jenkins, where we can automate the process like building, packaging, deployment, testing, and so on, so that we can do all these things with the click of a button in a matter of seconds. CI process helps us to deploy multiple releases parallelly. Now, in one day, we can do thousands and thousands of releases without impacting our environment and making sure these releases are in line with our requirement. The CI tool has an awesome notification mechanism where it notifies instantly of any success or failures happening, so that if I have to debug the code or troubleshoot it, I will know exactly at the pinpoint location where it is failing. You can do multiple notification management mechanism like an email and SMS, any ITSM tools. Now, all those modern ways of notification are possible using the CI tools like Jenkins. Now, we integrate these CI tools like Jenkins with modern day build and packaging tools like Maven and Gradle, so that we can automate the common problem which developers spend most of their time on. Now, developers spend half of their life cycle like packaging their code, code review, code deployment, unit testing. Now, all those things can be automated and can be done with the click of a button using these CI tools. Now, what is continuous integration? Now, we have talked about how it helps to save time, how it helps to save the energy, and how it helps to make release more frequent, and it helps us to streamline the process. Now, what actually is continuous integration? Now, if I go traditionally, continuous integration is basically, you can say, a process that helps us to combine or make smoothen the automation of tasks like compiling the code, doing the testing, and deploying the code into our life cycles. So how does this continuous integration work? So developers who works on projects generally commit their code in any version tools like GitHub, GitLab, Gitbucket, SVN, etc. So using continuous integration, we pull the code from the version control system like Git, for example. Now we automate the process like code compiling, code testing, code review, and then finally deploy the code in the lowest lifecycle environment. You can say continuous integration is sort of a development practice where developers pull the code from the version control system and make the code deploy in the lower lifecycle environment. Now, the beauty of using these CI tool is we can automate the process in such a way that whenever developers make a new commit or a new change in the version control system tools, we can create a sort of a pipeline, and the pipeline automatically picks the code from the VCS tools and compile it and then deploy the software. Another good thing about it is it does not require any human intervention. So once I have set up a pipeline, then I don't need to worry about running the code again and again or making any changes. It automatically happens in a fully automated process, as I mentioned a while back. Now we can use the process whenever a new commit happens, or you can run it on a scheduled basis or something. Now CI, or continuous integration, was first time proposed in 1991 as part of the extreme program concept. At that time, it was not adopted so well, but in the modern day industry, it has become the bread and butter of smoothing up release or for our development process. In a modern day world, continuous integration can be seen as a practice of merging all developers, working copy to a mainstream where you can develop and deploy the code multiple times in the same day with as many changes as possible. Now, there is no limit of how many lines of code. It can be tens and thousands of lines of code, which can be compiled multiple times throughout the duration. Let's see a case study where we try to see how things change for an organization after it adopted to the CI, or continuous integration mode. Here we have picked up an example of Adobe to see how it helped in the development process. Adobe realized at some point at the time that they have not released very frequently. When this happened, their market percentage share was down as they were not following the continuous integration approach. Now they were using the native method of compiling the code, debugging the code, testing the code, because of which they were noticing that it used to take up to 6 months release updates. Now 6 months was a long duration, whereas their competitors were releasing very frequently, which was helping them to capture the market share. Adobe decided some point at a time that they need to change their software development and deployment strategies, and they tried to adopt the continuous integration mechanism. Once they adopted the continuous integration mechanism, they found that the response time was a lot better and a lot faster. Now they were able to deploy the updates more frequently with every time a change was made by a developer or new release was being released. And it helped them reduce the response times, and they were 60% more faster. The development teams were getting more effective, and they were able to really deploy losses far more in a better and structured way than what they were doing without using CI. You can see how CI helps industry. Amazon is the best case scenario. Amazon in modern day scenario deploy codes every 11.6 seconds, almost 5 times every minute. Now this is all possible using the continuous integration. Now what is Jenkins? Now we've talked about what is CI, we've talked about why we need CI. Now let's talk about what is Jenkins and how does Jenkins fit in this particular picture. Now Jenkins is an open source automation server which helps us to automate the process of development relating to testing, deployment packaging, and others. It is a server-based system that run on software, Apache Tomcat. Now it supports VCS store like Git, Bitbucket, etc. It also supports build automation tools like Apache, Maven, and it helps to make and facilitate our continuous integration and continuous delivery process. Now Jenkins was first released in the year 2011, and it's completely open source software as a part of the MIT license. Jenkins is a plugin based profile. In Jenkins, you have got plugin which basically used to interact with different tools and components. In Jenkins, plugins are primarily released in language other than Java. Plugins are available to integrate Jenkins with most version control system tools and most databases. Using these plugins, we set up purposes, for example, unit testing. Now you can do compiling, you can do packaging. Now you can create some reports. Now you can do some logging. Now all these things are possible using plugins and Jenkins. Another important component that we've talked about in Jenkins, apart from plugins, is Jenkins notification, which we call it as Mailer. Using Mailer, guys, we can configure email notification. For instance, you can configure scenario. For example, you want mail notification when build is successful. Now, all these things can be done using Mailer as the Jenkins component. Another important component in Jenkins is the SSH agent. Jenkins also follow a typical master-slave topology. Now, why do we need a master-slave topology and a CI tools like Jenkins? Now, when you work in the organization, we have got multiple teams which you want to build and deploy their own pipeline or deploy their own software project codes. Now, teams don't want the piece of code to be run on a server which is owned by some other teams. So what we can do is we can set up a master-slave topology where Jenkins may run on a server X. But you can connect multiple other servers which will act as a slave. So when you are deploying a code executing a pipeline, you can run those codes on those XYZ servers. Now, this is the beauty of using Jenkins master-slave topology. Now, another good thing about Jenkins is Jenkins can be deployed on any operating system. In Jenkins, you can use in a Windows mode, a Linux mode, a Mac mode. Now, all these Jenkins jobs can be deployed on any operating system. It is not at all dependent. Now, both master and slave needs to be of the same operating system. Another important core component of Jenkins call is JavaDoc. This is our plugin in Jenkins, which basically is a part of Jenkins core that helps us to publish results like build action, build directory, what is the expected build output. All those things that we see in Jenkins, they all are happening using JavaDoc. Now let's talk about security injection. Apart from that, Jenkins have other sorts of authorization like project-based strategy, metric-based authorization, which help us to make Jenkins more secure. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the Jenkins overall. So as you can see on the diagram, Jenkins is pulling code from the source code control system like Git, Bitbucket, etc. To start deploying it in Jenkins, we have got a notification management system using Mailer, where if the build is successful, we get a WAR file or a zip file. We can define how we want the build to be created, and if it is a failure, it will send the notification management to a developer that something happened wrongly with the specific code lines and you need to rectify your codes. Now that is the beauty of using Jenkins. So Jenkins is still the bread and butter in the industry. There are some Jenkins competitors also in the market like GitLab Jenkins and some others. But by default, Jenkins is the to-go tool for the CI industry. So far we've talked about Jenkins. Now let's talk about what is pipelining in Jenkins. Now let's say I want to deploy a code. The code may have certain steps like first step I'm building the code, second step I'm compiling, then code reviewing, then packaging, then deploying. So how do I automate a combine of all these steps which can be executed in one go? Now to deploy all this scenario, we've created a delivery pipeline. Now pipeline is nothing but it's a combination of different steps or different tasks that we need to perform in order to deploy our code. Now using a pipeline instead of doing this task or code deployment manually, we combine them and deploy them as a sort of one common approach of a delivery pipeline. Now there are multiple ways on how you can create a pipeline. The two most common ways or common approaches of using a pipeline, as you can see from scenario, a declarative approach. And the second one that is used in the industry is a scripted approach. This particular is an example of a Jenkins pipeline script. Here you are saying we are first doing a stage called build stage, where we will be combining multiple tasks. Like first we are using Java, then we are printing something called echo hello pipeline. Then we are using Maven as the build automation tool and try to deploy a package, and then we are doing a shell script output of what all things are present in that particular directory structure. This is a typical example of syntax of how to create a pipeline in Jenkins. Now let's talk about the two predominant pipelines that are used in the IT industry, scripted and declarative. Now let's talk about what is scripted and declarative and how they are different from each other. A scripted pipeline is a traditional Jenkins pipeline approach, and a declarative pipeline is a modern day pipeline approach that is used in the industry. In a scripted pipeline, the syntax was first strict, while in declarative pipeline we use something called as groovy syntax. When you use a declarative pipeline, you can get a code from any version system tool like Git. You can create something called as Jenkins file, and you can download Jenkins file from a virtual constant tool, and that can be used to run your Jenkins code. When you use a scripted pipeline, you define a code something called as a node block. But one declarative pipeline will define a code in a pipeline block, as we can see in the previous example. Now let's talk about what is Jenkins file and how it can be used. Now Jenkins file are like a text file where you define your entire structure and syntax of your Jenkins. You know only how to download the file, and in particular, you can just give the part of your Git repo. If it is true, then get the credential, the private repo, and it can pull all the contents from there and just execute your code. It is a modern deployment mechanism that we use when we work with a Jenkins pipeline. Using Jenkins pipeline, we use certain things which help us. Let's talk about this. First is code review. Now you do a Jenkins pipeline, you can easily review your code. Your code can be reviewed by multiple developers before being executed. Now how that works is in Jenkins file, they are stored generally in a version control tool like Git. You can put something called as a pull request for a code review. Now different members of your team can review the code before you actually pull the Jenkins file and deploy it. Now you can do an audit trail or refer to as a long audit. You can log each and every step's output that is being executed as part of the Jenkins file and can see what is happening when the Jenkins file is getting executed. It's sort of like a verbose log. Then you can find a single place to store all your data or all your outputs. You don't need to have developers scattered here and there and writing their own codes for executing a Jenkins pipeline. Whole organization can approach a Jenkins file methodology where code can be stored in a VCS tools, and from there the code can be downloaded and can work as a single source for your entire pipeline. Now let's talk about the Jenkins workflow in particular. How does Jenkins workflow work? Jenkins workflow always start with a version control system, or you can say a source code repository. Multiple developers collaborate and they put their code in a source code system like Git, from where Jenkins try to pull the data from that source control system. For your system, there is no mandatory or the source code needs to be Git. It can be Bitbucket, SVN, whatever your organization uses with Jenkins server. Now we execute tasks like build, deploy, compiling, packaging, code reviewing. Now all these things happen using Jenkins server, where your Jenkins actually installed was running. Now Jenkins server can be any operating system. It can be a Windows machine, Ubuntu machine, Linux machine, or a Mac as well. It can be any operating system of today's modern world availability. Using this Jenkins server will execute our different tasks and scenarios. In Jenkins server, we use the mail functionality for the feedback mechanism. We notify developers the commit or the code deployment successfully or it is a failure. It also has some challenges. Now what can be done using the feedback mechanism? Possibly using the Jenkins server. So using Jenkins server, we always first deploy the code on a lower lifecycle environment. That is recommended standard practice. So what we do is we first deploy a QA server on a testing server, and once the code deployment is successful on the lower life cycle, then we go ahead and deploy the code on a production server. That is how the entire Jenkins workflow mainly particular interact first. Now guys, let's talk about the Jenkins installation and how to install Jenkins in a machine. As you all know, Jenkins by default run on 8080. So please make sure that if you're using any VMs in your organization, the port 8080 firewall settings are open and configured so that it can be accessible. I will get into some of the prerequisites required for installing Jenkins post, which will go ahead and install Jenkins on a Windows box. Now there are a few first configuration that needs to be done, and I'll be covering those as well. So once I have Jenkins installed and configured properly, I will get into the user administrative part, then create few users, and I will get into some of the plugins for setting up various kinds of access permissions for these users, and I also put in some of the freestyle jobs. Freestyle job is basically nothing but a very simple job, and I will also show you the powerfulness of Jenkins by scheduling this particular job to run based upon time schedule. Then I will also connect Jenkins with GitHub. Now GitHub is a source code repository where I've got some repositories put up there. So using Jenkins, I will connect to GitHub, pull up a repository that is existing on GitHub onto the Jenkins box, and then run a few commands to build this particular repository that is pulled from the Jenkins sending out emails. Now it's a very important configuration of Jenkins or any other continuous integration server for that particular matter. Now, whenever there is any notification that has been sent as a part of either build going bad or by being good or building propagate to some environment and all these scenarios, now you will need the continuous integration servers to be sending out notification. So I will get into the bit of details of how to configure the Jenkins for sending out emails. Now, I will also get into the scenario where I will have a web application such as a Maven based Java web application, which will be pulled from the GitHub repository, and I will deploy it into the Tomcat server. Now the Tomcat server will be locally running on the my system. Eventually I will get into the other very important topic, which is the master slave configuration. It's a very important and pretty interesting topics where distributed builds is achieved using a master slave configuration. Now all this can be very easily base up using a plugin. So this is what I'm going to be covering as a part of this tutorial. Now, Jenkins is a web application that is written in Java, and there are various ways in which you can use and install Jenkins. Now, I've listed the popular three mechanisms in which Jenkins is usually installed in any system. Now, the topmost one is a window or a Linux-based services. So if at all you have a window like the way I have, and I'm going to use this mechanism for this demo, so I will download the MSI installer. So whenever you start as a service, it goes out and nicely install all that is required for my Jenkins, and I have a service that can be started or stopped based upon my needs. Any flavors of Linux is one of many other ways of running Jenkins in downloading this generic WAR file, and as long as you have a JDK installed. You can launch this WAR file by the command opening up a command box prompt or shell prompt defer to later on Linux box specifying jar and the name of this WAR file, typically bringing up your web application, and you can continue with your installation. Now the only thing being, if at all you want to stop using Jenkins, you just go ahead and close this prompt even into a control C and then bringing down this prompt and in Jenkins server. And then you also have the other older versions of Jenkins where run popularly using this way, in which you already have a Java based web server running up and running. So you kind of drop in this WAR file into the root folders or the HTTP root folder of your web server. So Jenkins will explore and kind of bring up your application. All user credentials or user administration is all taken care by the Apache or the Tomcat server or the web server on which the Jenkins is running. This was a very old way of running, but still some people use it because if they don't want to maintain two servers, now if they already have a Java web service which is being nicely maintained and backup, now Jenkins can't run a test to it, alright? So either ways, it doesn't matter however you're going to bring up your Jenkins instance. The way we're going to operate Jenkins is all going to be very same or similar, but the subtle change in terms of user administration. Now, if at all you're launching it through any other web server, which will take care of the user administration. Otherwise, all the command or all the configuration or the way in which I'm going to run this demo is going to be same across any of these installation. All right. As I mentioned earlier, Jenkins is nothing but a simple web application that is run in Java. So all that is needed is Java, preferably JDK 11 or 17 with a 2 GB RAM, which is a meant RAM for running the Jenkins. And also, like any other open source tool sets, when you install JDK, ensure that you set in the environment variables. Now Java home to point in the right directory. Now this is something very specific to JDK. Now, but for any other open source tools that I've installed, there is always a preferred environment variable that we got to set in, which is specific to that particular tools that if you're going to use. This is a generic thing that there is for you to know. Now for any other open source project, because the open source project discover themselves by using the environment variables. So as a general practice or a good practice, always set these environment variables according. So I already have a JDK 17 installed on my system. But in case you do not, what I will recommend is just navigate to the browser, to the Oracle homepage, just type in your search for install JDK page. Then you'll have the accept the license agreement. Now what I will recommend is just navigate on your browser to the Oracle homepage and just type in your search install JDK. Now you're gonna navigate to the down here and install the 64 installer, that is the .exe. Now let me show you once I have installed what I've done with regards to the path. So if you get into this environment variable, so I have just set in the Java home variable. Now you can go back to your this PC, go to C programs, go to Java, and then copy this part, then click in the environment variables. I'll select the first one, that is the edit the system environment variable, and we click on the environment variables and we'll set a path here. As you can see here, Java home, and we'll go down here on the path. So this is the path for your Java home screen. So simply click on edit and click on new, and we will just paste the path which we have just copied from the install.exe Java. So I've already installed it, as you can see there, C program files. I simply click on OK. So the only difference between the system variables and the user variables for daemon is this is control the whole system of the JDK, the system variable. So we want to edit in the system variables. So the path I've been changing here is in the system variables. All right. Now the home variable is where I have the SQLs and program friend of the JDK17. Now you see this is my Java home. Alright, now one thing to do is ensure that in case you run Java or Java C, for a command, you ensure that you also add the path into this path variable, right? So if you see somewhere, I will say there you got the colon program files. Now you click on that and I'll show you the bin as well, which I've copied and pasted here as well. Okay, so simply just go back. So that's how you get the bin. Copy this path and paste it here, which I've already done it. So I'll just simply click on OK, OK, and OK. Now let me minimize the screen as well. So the next thing we need to do now is go to CMD to check if your Java has been installed on your system. So you simply type on Java space / version, and you can see I already have Java version 17.0.5 installed in my system and it's up and running. So as you can see, the runtime environments, and it's a 64-bit server. This is a VM virtual machine. Okay, so as you can see, Java is installed in my system and is up and ready. So the next thing we need to do now is install Jenkins. I'm just canceling that out and open a new browser again, new tab, and type in jenkins.io. Now, as you can see, this is the homepage of Jenkins. All right. So you can even read the documentation, or you can simply click on download. Will take you to this page. Now here you can see the hardware and software requirements, then what packaging is required for downloading the installing Jenkins. So this is the part for, on the left hand side we have the LTS, and on the other side we have the, which is a more stable, and on the right hand side we have the regular weekly releases. So we'll definitely go for the stable LTS download, which is a long-term support, which is released every 12 weeks, whereas the regular releases changes weekly. So I'll be going ahead and scroll down and click on window. So as you can see, there are different parameters where you can do. You can have on Dockers, then you have Ubuntu, then you have the CentOS, Fedora, or the Windows, like I'm going to install in this case in this demo. Then, but we have different aspects as well, like the FreeBSD, the CentOS, Mac OS, etc. So as you can see on the first stop, we have the .var. We can even install that and unzip that. But in this case, in this demo part, we'll simply click on Windows. So go on ahead and click Window, guys. Now you can see the download has started. So we just wait a few seconds until it's done installing the MSI. And as you can see, it's done. So this is my download in Jenkins instance. So what I'll be doing now is simply click on next. Now, as you can see, guys, on top here, it's written the Jenkins run on localhost 8080. So keeping that in mind, click on next. As you can see, this is where our Jenkins is installed. That is in C and program files and by the name Jenkins. So you can always change this location where the Jenkins has been installed. But in this case, I'll rather keep it on the C drive itself. So the next thing you need to do now is we'll run server as a local system so that we don't have to put any administrator or the password. And so the next step now is we test the port. So as you can see, you got a green tick mark. So next, now you can see here that it has failed because there is no compatible Java version 11 or 17. But as you can remember, guys, we have already installed Java 17 and we have already verified that we're using the command prompt where it has shown us the version Java 17. So what you need to do is simply click on change and select the Java 17 from Java 8. So simply click on Java 17, JDK 17, as you can see, click on next and click on the install part. Done and dusted. So I've already told you that Jenkins run on the localhost 8080, right? So we're gonna go localhost colon 8080 and hit on enter. Now, as you can see, please wait while Jenkins is getting ready for work, right? So this will take a few minutes and then you'll be having to provide the credential of the administrator. All right. So just give it a few minutes while it's starting up. All right. Now you have to provide the administrator password, right? So you can go ahead and go down out here. You can see the password is in the C and goes to the program data, then Jenkins. Then we have a .jenkins, then a secret, then you'll find the initial admin password. So we need to head out there. So what we need to do is we'll go down there. So I'm just going to minimize the screen now, minimize it once again. And as you remember, we go to the C. So you can see right where it is, I'll just show you, minimize the screen here so you can see and do it along with me. So you can see this in PC, then scroll down to C disk. Okay, this thing popped up, sorry. It's in this, so you have a program data, right? As you can see here down, there is no program data, right? So what you need to do is it's in the hidden file. So what you need to do now is click on the three buttons and view, click on show and click on the hidden items. Now let's see if it's there. Scroll down, program data, you can see at the last. Yeah, simply click on that, double click on it. As you can see, then we have to go to the folder name as Jenkins. Yeah, you can see on the top, Jenkins and .jenkins. Then we need to search for secrets. There it is, folder. And as you can see, there's an initial admin password. Now you simply click on that. We'll try with the notepad so we can copy. So simply copy that and paste it in the administrator password and click on continue. So in this case, I will not save it in my computer or system. So there are two installation plugins available, which is custom by Jenkins. One is they have suggested plugins, and the other one is you can select the plugins which you want to be installed. So in this scenario, I'll simply click on the install suggested by the Jenkins. So what happened is the plugins are all related to each other. So it's like the typical RPM kind of a problem where you try to install some plugins and got a dependency which is not installed and you get all those issues. In order to get rid of that, what Jenkins recommends is that there are a bunch of plugins that is already recommended and they are good to go, right? So just go ahead and blindly click on that recommended by the plugins, which is a suggested or custom by the Jenkins. And as you can see, these getting started process is going ahead. So it'll take a few minutes depending on your internet speed or on the system. Now you can see all these plugins are installing it for you. So it will take a few minutes time. So let's just wait till we get all the plugins installed in a system properly. So this is a good combination to kind of begin with, and keeping that in mind, Jenkins need a lot of bandwidth, right? Now, in terms of network, so in case you know your network is not so good, it'll make for a few of these plugins will kind of fail, and these plugins are all are available on openly or mirrored site, and sometimes some of them may be down. So do not worry in case some of these plugin kind of fail to install. You get an options to kind of retry installing them, but just ensure that you at least at the most 90 to 95% of all of these plugins are installed without any problem. As you can see, we are almost there. It's around 60% to 70%. Now once all these plugins are installed, now my plugin in the installation is all good. There's no failure in any of the plugin. So after that, we've got to create this first username, that is the first admin user. So you need to give in the username, then the password, then you have to confirm your password, give it your full name and your email address, right? So we'll start it by giving the username. I'll keep it plain and simple. Now you got to remember these password and the confirm password, because if you kind of lose the or you don't remember the password of the Jenkins, it'll be really hard to get back your account. So try to keep it as simple as possible, and keeping in mind that you have to remember the password because getting back this account will be really difficult. All right, so I'll be putting the password as well. Give it my full name. Okay, my A is small, and go to the email address damandla.namare@edureka.co. All right, so once it's all done, so just simply click on save and continue. So click on never, don't want to save the password. And as you remember, I've told you by default Jenkins run on localhost 8080, right? So you can simply click this or you can copy this or just write save and finish. You can even copy this link, save and finish. Now start using Jenkins. All right, now that's kind of complete my Jenkins installation. As you can see, it was not that tough at all. Now the Jenkins is installed correctly. Now let me quickly walk you through some of the very minimal configuration that is required. Now these are kind of the first time configuration that is required. So, and also let me warn you, the UI is a little hard for many people to wrap their head around, especially the window guys. But if you're all a Java guys, you know how painful it is to write UI in Java. You kind of appreciate how the effort that has gone into the UI bottom line. It was a little hard to wrap your head around. It becomes like start using it, possibly you start liking it all right? So I will get into some of these important ones, something called as configuration system or the configuration a system. This is something kind of put in your configuration to complete your Jenkins instance. Now, few things to kind of look out for. This is the home. Now, configure system is where you kind of put in the configuration for your complete Jenkins instance. Now, a few things to keep a lookout is the home directory. All right. Now, this is a Java home where all the configuration, all the workspace, anything and everything regarding Jenkins is stored out here in the system message. Now, in the system message, you can put in some of the message on the system. You can just type anything you want, probably show up somewhere here on the menu. Now, the number of executors is a very, very important configuration. This just lets Jenkins know at any point in time how many jobs or how many threads can be run. So you can kind of visualize like a thread that can be run on this particular instance. As a thumb rule, if at all you're on a single core system, the number of executor you should be good enough in case at any point if there is any multiple jobs that kind of get triggered at the same time. Now, in case the number of executor are less compared to the number of jobs that are out there to open up the new, so you don't need to panic because they will get queued up and eventually Jenkins will be get up and running. So just keep that in mind that whenever a new job kind of gets triggered in the CPU usage and the memory usage, in terms of the disk, it's like a very high of the Jenkins instance. So that's something you gotta keep in mind, all right? The number of executors for my system is kind of a good label. For my Jenkins, I don't want any of these usage. So how do you want to use your Jenkins? This is good for me because I only have a primary server that is running. So I want to use this as low as possible. All right. As you can see, it's 2. Now this is usage. So I can leave everything to default. So what I want is I want this SMTP server configuration. Now, Jenkins will be sending out some emails. What I've done here is I've configured the SMTP details of my personal email details. In case you are, in your organization, you want some sort of an email that is like an email ID that is set up for a Jenkins server. So you can specify the SMTP server details of your company so that you can authorize Jenkins to kind of like send out emails. But in case you want to try it out like I have configured my personal email ID, which is of the Gmail for sending out notification for the same TP server, will be the SMTP Gmail. So it's right as username as. So we have used SMTP authentication and then we're given the password. Now you can just send out an email to see if at all this configuration works again. Now Gmail will not allow you to allow anybody to send out notification on your behalf. So you just have to lower the security level of your Gmail ID so that you can allow programmatically somebody to send out email notification on your behalf. So I've already done that. So let's see if this works. Let's test it again since I've entered the wrong password. Let's see if this works or not. And it has given me a password has not accepted. So now as you can see, since my Gmail has not been set up, so what you have to do is you have to lower your security level of your Gmail ID so that you can be allowed to test your email configuration. All right. So simply click on save. So now we're heading back to the dashboard. Now we should go to the global tool configuration. Now look at the scenario where Jenkins is a continuous integration server. Now it does not know what kind of a code base it's going to pull and what kind of tool says is required or what is the code that is going to pull in and how it is going to build. So you'll have to put in all the tools that is required for building the appropriate kind of code that you're going to pull in from like a source code repository. So for example, in case your source code is a Java code, and assuming that you have because this demo, this is my laptop and I put all the configuration, JDK, everything on my laptop because I am a developer and I'm working on the laptop, but my country's integration servers will be known as a separate server without anything being installed on it. So in case I want Jenkins to like run on a Java code and I need to specify the JDK location of this out there. So okay, since I've already have the JDK installed and have already put in the Java home directly, or rather and the environment correctly, so I don't need to do it. So now if at all you want the Jenkins server to use Git, now as you know that Git is a command bash or the command prompt for running Git and connecting to any other Git server. So you will need Git to be installed on that particular system. Now Gradle and Maven, if at all you have some Maven as you want to do this in any other tools that you're going to install on your system, which is your continuous integration server. So you'll have to come in here and try to configure it. And in case you have not configured, then Jenkins will not be able to find these tools for building your task. So since I don't want to install anything, we'll go back to manage system. Now you can see the global, configure global security. Now you can see this an SSH server. Now what does this mean if you ask me? Jenkins own user database. So this is nothing but the security access control, which is set to Jenkins own user database. So what this mean is, Jenkins by default, it uses files system where it stores all the usernames, which hashes up like these username that kind of stores them as of it. So as of now, Jenkins is configured to use in your own database, assuming that you're running an organization. So you will probably want to, have some sort of LDAP server, which will in turn have a control of your access to your Jenkins repository. So you will specify your LDAP server details, the root TN password or the managed TN. So the LDAP, as you can see, or the LDAP, which the Jenkins itself will tune in for your specific servers. Now you have the manager DN, the manager password. Now all these should be filled, all these details should be filled in case you want to connect your Jenkins instance with your LDAP server or any of the authentication server that you have in your organization. But for now, since I don't have any of these things, I'm going to use its own database. That's good enough, right? So I'll simply the Jenkins own user database. So I will set up some authorization methods. So for now, let me not get into any of these details of this. Just be aware that Jenkins can be connected for authorization to an LDAP server, or you can have Jenkins managing its own server, which is happening as of now. Let me put in a very, very simple job. All right, so let's create a new job in this video. So simply click on new item. Now simply you can add any item name here. So the most important here are the freestyle and pipeline. Now for the first demo, we'll click on the freestyle job and click on OK. So in the description, you can write anything in your description. This is an optional thing. So you can say this is my first job demo for. So in this demo, I don't want it to connect it to any source code for now. So I'm just going to leave it to none. Now we don't need to write any build environment as well. Now in this build step, we simply click on execute Windows on. So since I'm on the window box, I will say execute window bash command. All right. So what do you want to do? So let me just echo something. Echo hello world. This is hello. Welcome to my first demo job in Edureka. Then we'll specify the date and time as well. So put in date, colon as time as well. So you can see it's a very, very simple command. You just have to put an echo and we have something along with the date and time. So we'll keep everything as simple as possible. So we'll save this job. So once it is shipped, so you can see there's a build history. So once you have saved this job, the job name comes up here. As you can see, project first job. By mistakenly, I've written double T in my first job. Now, as you'll see here, there's a builds history. So there is nothing as of now because I've put in a job. I have not yet run it. All right. So let me try and build it now. Now you can see there's a number, my first job. So you will see a date and you will see the time since I've clicked twice. So if I've come 1 and 2. Now, if you click on this, now you can see the console output. Now, if you click on this, now you can see is it. And this is the output that is run. Hello, welcome to my first demo job in Edureka, along with the date and along with the time. Now, if you see this, now if we navigate this, we go back to here. Now, as you can see, there's a folder created as jobs, right? So this is the directory what I was mentioning earlier regarding Jenkins home. If you can just open it up wider, you can see this folder jobs. So this as mentioned earlier regarding Jenkins home. So all the job related stuff, it's specific to this particular Jenkins installation is all here. Now all the plugins that I install, the details in each of those plugins can be found here, right? So the workspace is where the jobs that I've created, whichever I'm running would, there'll be an individual folder specific to the jobs that has been put up there. All right. So one job, one quick run. That is how it looks like. So the workspace is where all the jobs that I've created, whichever I'm running, there'll be an individual folder specific to that jobs that has been made up. All right. So as you can see, there's the first job that we have just created just now. So one job, one quick run that we have done. That is how it's look like. It's pretty simple. Now let's go back. So let us put on a second job. So we can go back to dashboard, click on new items and say second job. Let's get the spelling correct this time. Second, I wrote second first again. Second job, and I can put a semicolon here, underscore. Second job, we click on freestyle again. Click on OK, and you can say this is my second. So I just want to demonstrate the powerfulness of the automation server and how simple it is to automate a job that is put on the Jenkins, which will be triggered automatically. Now remember what I've said earlier about Jenkins, because at the core of Jenkins is a very, very powerful automation server. All right, this is my second job. This is my second job, which will be triggered automatically. Okay, so in the build step, we'll put bash tabs, then we'll write here echo again. So we'll say here something as second job is going on here. The tools, with the tools of an automation tool. And then I'll give some date as well. Date, put in the time. But this time I'm going to demonstrate the powerfulness of the automation server that is there. So if you see here, there is a build trigger. So build can be triggered using various triggers that is there. So you'll get into the GitHub trigger or a hook or a webhook, which is kind of triggering. So we'll see that later on. But for now, what I want to do is I want to ensure that this job that I'm going to put in will be automatically triggered. Let's say every minute I'm on this job to be run on its own. So we'll put as build periodically and we will set the time. Now, if you can see here, there's a bunch of help. If you want to go through it, you can go through it. Let's just put out very, very simple regular expression for scheduling this job every minute. All right. So 5,000 is all I'm going to put in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let me save this. Let's go back. So when you build periodically, now you can see here. Now we just copy that. And now how do we check if it gets triggered every 15 minutes? So I just don't do anything but wait for 15 minutes. And if everything goes well, Jenkins will automatically trigger my second job in 15 minutes. Now you can see here, it's still processing. So we have to wait for 15 minutes. Now we can go through all this command of the scheduling time. So you can see how many stars required for each minute or for each hour. Now as you can see, it's done. You can just go and go here and go to console output. Now you can see the finish is success and you have this. Now we can go back and copy this and see if they're on your it's already there. You can go to workspace. You can see your second job has also been created automatically by Jenkins. Now that I have my Jenkins up and running, a few jobs that have been put up here on my Jenkins instance, I will need a way of controlling access to my Jenkins server. This is where I will use a plugin called a role-based access plugin and create a few rules. The rules are something like a global rule and a project rules for a specific role. I can have different rules and I can have users who have signed up, or the users from my create kind of assign to these roles so that each of these users fall into some category. This is my way of kind of controlling access to my Jenkins instance and ensuring that people don't do something unwanted. All right. So first thing first, let me go ahead and install a plugin for doing that. So we get into manage Jenkins, then we go to manage plugins. We will plugins, install plugins. We have advanced settings. So these are the available plugins, and then if you go to install, now these are the installed plugins. Now let's go and search for a role-based. Now you can see here, base authorization strategy. So this will happen is it enables user authorization using a role-based strategy. Now roles can be defined globally or for particular jobs or nodes selected by a regular expression. This is the plugins that we want. So you will install it without restart. So it's success. It looks good. Looks good. Now waiting for this. Yeah, it's success. Done now. So go back to the top page. Now one thing to remember, guys, is Jenkins is running on a Java using a Java instance. So typically many things will work the same way unless inherently you want it to restart. So, but a good practice is whenever you do some sort of a big installation or a big patches on your Jenkins instance, just ensure that you can restart it. Otherwise, there will be a difference in terms of what is installed in the system and what is there on the file system. So you'll need to flush out few of those settings later on. But for now, these are very small plugins. So this will run without any problem. But otherwise, if at all there are some plugins which they will need to restart, you can kindly go ahead and restart your Jenkins instance. But for now, I don't need that. So it looks good. I have installed the plugins. So where do I see my plugins and install the plugins? Just specific to the user control to the access control. Now let's go to the configure global security. Now we can go ahead and check the authorization. You can see here authorization, role-based strategy popping out here. Right, as you can see, the role-based strategy has been installed and has been shown here. This is because of my installation of my role-based plugin. So this is what I would want to enable because I already have my own database set up, and for the authorization part in that sense that you can do what I'm going to install. I mean, I've already installed a role-based strategy, right? Now I'm going to enable that strategy. So we'll simply click on role-based strategy, okay, and click on save. So now I'm going to enable that strategy. All right, now I will say, okay, now I've installed the role-based access plugin. Now I will need to just set it up and check, I will go ahead and create some roles, and it shows that I've assigned users as per these roles. So let me go to manage the configuration, manage Jenkins, and let's see how we can create our roles. Not here as well. So we can do manage and assign roles for creating our roles, okay? Now you'll only be able to see this once and only when you have installed those plugins. Now I've enabled the plugins. Now I've enabled the role-based access control as well. Now we'll go ahead and create some rules for this particular Jenkins instance. So first I will manage roles. So this is at a very high level, which is a global role. Now there are some role to add which you can add by yourself, some item roles for some projects or something. So let me create a role which kind of visualize like a group. So we'll create our own called the developer. Typically the Jenkins instance or the CA instance are kind of owned up or controlled by a QA guys. So that's why I'm creating a role called developer, and I'm adding this role at a global role. So I will add this here, and then I can click read as well. So we've given this administrator, right? So we add this. So as you can see here, you will see this develop a rule that there is each one of these options that you can hover here and sort of see what kind of permission you have given it to this developer role that you have just created. So you can read and write, then you can create some changes. We have given a permission as credential, which you can create. Then you can delete, then manage the domains. So this kind of help or the permission that they're giving it. So these are some kind of sort of a help for a permission specific. So you want to see it's like how it sounds a little different, but I would want to give you a very little permission for the developer. So from an administrative perspective, I just want him to have a read and write kind of a role credentials. Okay, let's say read and write, and I can allow him to view as well. I don't want him to create agents or give him some delete. No, I don't want him to configure, build, provision, or connect or disconnect anything. So I'll just give him a read and a view. And I don't even want him to have access to my workspace as well. So I'll just give him now for run. So I won't even give him the access to that. Now we can give view as well. I don't want him to delete. And what am I doing here is just creating a global rules for the developers. And I've given him a very limited roles, in the sense that I don't want this developer to be able to run any agents, nor create jobs or build jobs or cancel jobs or configure jobs at the maximum. Right? So I just want him to read that is already put up there. Okay, so I will save now and create a rule. That is done. Now that I've created a rule. Now I still don't have any users that is in there in the system. So let me go ahead and create some users on the system. So we'll go back to manage Jenkins and go to manage users. Now let me create another user, okay, by clicking on plus users, and we'll say this one as a developer. Give him some password and name him as develop123. An email, I can just simply give my email here and click on create users. Okay, 1, 2. So we have created. Now this developer 1.2 is a user that I've configured, but still yet I have not set any rules for this particular user. So I will go to the manage and gain and will give him the manage and assign roles. So now we'll go manage and assign roles and we'll assign role. So what you're gonna see, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna assign a role that is specific to that particular developer. So I'll find that particular user and assign him, or means the developer role that I've already configured the rules. Okay. So this is the role that we have created. So we will search the user that we have just created, developer 1.2. Now if I assign this, so go ahead and save the changes. Now let's go ahead and check the permission of this particular user by logging on to my main account and logging back as the developer one. Now let's log out from here. Log out and say developer 1. Now, if you remember, this role was created with very less privilege. So there you go. I have Jenkins, but I don't see a new item. I can't trigger a new jobs. I can't do anything. I see these jobs. However, I don't think I'll be able to start this job. Now, I don't have the permission to set forth at the maximum. So what I can do is look at this job, see. So this is a limited role that was created and I've added this Damanang Lamare to that particular role, which was a developer role, so that the developers don't get to configure any of the jobs because the Jenkins instance is owned by a QA person. He doesn't want to give developer any ethnicity or right. So the rights that he set out by creating a developer roles, or any user who's tagged as a part of this developer role will get the same kind of permission. And these permission can be, fine grained. It can be a project specific permission as well. But for now, I just demonstrate the high level permission that I've set. So let me quickly log out of this user and get back to my admin account. So because I need to continue my demo with the developer roles that was created. Now, one of the reasons for Jenkins being so popular, as I mentioned earlier, is the bunch of plugins, but it's got plugin for connecting anything and everything. Now you can find the Jenkins plugins, then you will see the index over here. There are so many plugins that are there. All of these are wonderful plugins. Whatever connectors that you will need if you want to connect Jenkins to the AWS instance, or you want to connect Jenkins to a Docker instance, or any of those containers, you will have a plugin. You can go and search up if you want. If you want to connect Jenkins to Bitbucket, simply click on Big. So as you can see, these are available. So bottom line, Jenkins without plugin is nothing. So plugins is the heart of Jenkins for you to connect, or in order to connect Jenkins with any of the containers or any of the other sets of tools, you will need the plugins. Now, if you want to connect or you want to build a repository which has got Java and Melvin, you will need to install Maven and GTK on an instance. Now, if at all you're looking for a Microsoft build, you will need to have MS Build installed on your Jenkins instance. And the plugins that will be triggered MS Build. If at all you want to listen to some server-side webhooks from GitHub, you will need a GitHub specific plugins. You want to connect to Jenkins, to AWS, you need those plugins. Now, if you want to connect Docker instance that is running anywhere in the world, as long as you have the URL, which is publicly reachable, you just have a Docker plugin that is installed on your Jenkins instance. So if you want to connect to a Docker instance that is running anywhere in the world, as long as you have the URL which is publicly reachable, you just have a plugin that is installed on your Jenkins instance. Now, SonarQube is one of the popular statistic code analysis, so you can connect a Jenkins build. You can build a jobs on Jenkins and push it to a SonarQube and get SonarQube to run analysis on that and get back the result in Jenkins. Now, all of these works very well because of the plugins. Now with that, let me connect our Jenkins instance to a GitHub. So now let us connect our Jenkins instance to a GitHub. Now I already have a very simple Java repository up on my GitHub instance. So let me connect Jenkins to this particular GitHub instance and pull out a job that is put up there. Right. So this is a very, very simple and repository is called Hello Java. And this is what is there in the repository. This is a simple class file. It's just got some one line of system .out. So this is already present on github.com at this place, and this will be the URL for this repository. So I will pick it up. So what I'll do is I will connect my Jenkins instance to go to my GitHub and provide my credential and pull out this repository, which is on the cloud hosted in the github.com, and get it to my Jenkins instance and then build this particular Java file. Now I'm keeping the source code very simple. It is just a Java file. Now how do I build my Java file? How do I compile my Java file? I just say Java C and name. Now the name of my class file is hello Java, and how do I run my Java file? I will say Java and hello. Okay, so remember I don't need to install any plugins now because what it all needs is a Git plugin. So Git plugin which is already installed on this system. So let us go back, create a new items. We'll create a first job here. Let's say this is a Git first project. Now let it be a freestyle. Okay. Now we'll go to the source code management. Remember, right? We always have been keeping it on none. So in this part, we'll put it as Git. Now, as you remember earlier in examples, we do not use any source code because we were just putting up some echo kind of jobs that did not need any integration with any of the source code system. So now let us connect this. So I'm going to put up my source code and it will show up because the plugin is already there. Now I've already copied the HTTP address from the GitHub and simply paste it here. Now what is the credential? So I'll simply add that. If we add credential this time, so I'll just click and cancel. So if we just add Jenkins, so we'll add a username here. Now if there are any errors in terms of not able to Jenkins to be able to find the git or the git.exe, or if the credentials are wrong somewhere down here, so you'll see a red message, okay, like something is not right. So for now it's okay. Now I'm gonna build trigger. Now what will be there as a part of my build step? Because this step repository just have the Java file correct, hello Java. So in order for me to build this, I will say execute window bash command, and I'll say Java, hello Java, Java. Now let's save this. Okay, so let me try to run this. Okay, build now. Click on this. Console output. Great. Now as you can see here, there's a lot of executed Git on the behalf. It goes on there to provide my credentials, and so it pull all my repository and my default. Now we'll pull up the master branch. This is there on the post string, and it kind of builds this whole thing on Java C hello world. Finish, and it's given me a success. So it's kind of build this whole thing Java C hello to Java, and it runs this Java hello world. And there, as you can see, this is the output. It's there, and here you can see if you want to look at the content that was created on the repository. Now if you can go there into my workspace like I've showed earlier, you can just simply click here and you can already see here it's been created Git first project and saying hello. Now as you can see, it's already there. Now if you can go back, as you can see, and simply close that. Now what it did was Jenkins on your behalf went over all the way to GitHub, pulled this repository from there, and then it brought it down to your local system on my Jenkins instance. Now it's compiled it and it ran this particular application. Now that I've integrated Jenkins successfully with Git, simply within the Java application, now let's do a quick summary of what we've learned about. So we have learned about what is continuous integration, why do we need continuous integration, now what is Jenkins, what is the pipeline, different types of pipeline using Jenkins. Now we have discussed the entire Jenkins workflow and did a hands-on on how to install Jenkins and see how to create a pipeline through Git. Now with this guys, we have come to the end of today's session. I hope at this point you are confident enough with the Jenkins tutorial and understand how do you connect Jenkins with a Git repository and how much powerful it is to automate and using tools like Jenkins. Now in case you have any doubts or queries, then make sure to leave it in the comments below. Thank you and happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!